Marisol never thought she'd move back to her hometown. But when her contract ended abruptly, leaving her jobless in a distant city, she returned to the familiar yet fading neighborhood she grew up in. Cheaper rent, a slower pace, and the comfort of old memories, all reasons to come back. Yet she arrived to discover that the place wasn't quite as she recalled. Her old street looked slightly abandoned. A hush over the sidewalks. Buildings stood chipped and neglected. And there was an odd tension under the street lamps each evening. Desperate for a quick living arrangement, she scoured local rental ads. One listing stood out for its suspicious affordability: spacious two-bedroom apartment number 404. Newly vacant. Very low rent. The building's address was near the outskirts of the neighborhood, in a once thriving complex known as Maplewood Heights. She couldn't recall ever hearing about an apartment 404 there. But the budget price overcame her caution. She made an appointment with the landlord, who seemed eager to show it. On the day of the viewing, a biting wind rattled the chain-link fences around Maplewood Heights. Marisol stepped through the chipped, graffiti-tagged front gates, noticing the structure's peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. The landlord, a middle-aged man with anxious eyes, met her in the dim lobby. He led her up an old elevator to the 4th floor, never quite meeting her gaze. The corridor smelled faintly of mildew, lights buzzing overhead. A sense of disquiet welled in Marisol, but she dismissed it as overthinking. The landlord stopped in front of a battered door marked 404, gave her a brittle smile, and unlocked it. At first glance, the unit was unremarkable: a living room with scuffed floors, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms that needed fresh paint. But the atmosphere felt off. An unnatural stillness pressed down the moment she stepped inside, as if the air refused to circulate. She'd never experienced such a stark hush in any apartment. Nevertheless, the landlord insisted it had everything she needed. He rattled off disclaimers about the building's age, disclaimers about minor repairs needed. Then he practically shoved the lease into her hands. Marisol found his urgency odd. Was he simply eager to rent it out? Or was something else at play? Yet the rent was the best deal in town. Despite a prickle of dread, she convinced herself it was merely an old building with normal issues. She signed the lease on the spot. She told herself that rumors about certain cursed apartments were just local ghost stories, old wives' tales that had never been proven. If the landlord was desperate, it might be from a struggling economy, not anything supernatural. Within days, she moved in, and soon discovered that apartment 404 was anything but normal. On her first morning, Marisol went to the complex's shabby convenience store for basic supplies. The cashier, a frail older woman, noticed the address on her new ID form. Her eyes widened. "You're in 404, she whispered, voice dropping to a hush. Marisol frowned. "Yes. Why?" The woman swallowed nervously, forced a shaky smile, and handed over the receipt without another word. Marisol left, unsettled by the reaction. Later, she cornered a neighbor in the hallway, a polite middle-aged man named Conrad. She asked if he knew anything about her apartment's reputation. Conrad hesitated, quickly glancing around the corridor as though being watched. He admitted hearing stories about odd happenings, neighbors vanishing overnight, official records that never quite lined up. But he insisted he didn't know details, then abruptly changed the topic. Marisol pressed him, but he retreated into his unit, locking the door. Another neighbor refused to answer the door at all. Something about 404 spooked them. She began searching online for Maplewood Heights folklore, rummaging through local forums. One cryptic thread read, "Maplewood's apartment 404 equals where tenants vanish." The post was short, claiming that over the past 20 years, a series of renters in that unit either broke their lease abruptly or disappeared entirely. Police investigations apparently found no evidence of foul play, concluding the tenants simply moved on without notice. Yet local rumor insisted the truth was more sinister. Apartment 404 ate its residents, or some intangible darkness lurked inside. Marisol tried to brush it off as an overhyped urban legend. She was a level-headed adult, not prone to flights of superstition. And yet, she couldn't shake the quiet sense that something was wrong. Small oddities began cropping up at night, faint knocking from somewhere behind the walls, lights flickering in the corridor outside her door, the sense of being watched whenever she entered the living room. She assured herself it was just an aging building with faulty wiring and a vivid imagination. But the tension grew daily. During her first week, she noticed that items in the apartment shifted positions overnight. Not in an obvious, chaotic way, just small changes. Her keys, left on the kitchen table, would be found on the windowsill come morning. A picture frame on the shelf turned slightly askew. Doors she distinctly remembered closing would be found cracked open. She tested the locks. Everything was secure. No sign of burglary. She grew uneasy, suspecting sleepwalking or memory lapses. Yet, she never had such issues before. Then came the nightly hush. The moment she switched off the lights to sleep. All noise outside, neighbors' televisions, passing cars, seemed to dampen unnaturally. Once or twice, she woke to find the entire apartment submerged in an oppressive silence. Even her own breathing seemed muffled, like a vacuum pressing down. Then, an hour or two before dawn, normal city sounds drifted back. She confided in Comrade, who only muttered that everyone in 404 complains of that hush, but refused further discussion. One evening, after returning from a late shift, she found a black stain creeping along the corner of her bedroom ceiling, like mold or water damage. She tried scrubbing it, but it persisted, seeping into the plaster. The next day, it spread a few inches farther, oddly shaped like a dark handprint. The building manager shrugged, promising a maintenance check but never showed. Tension spiked in Marisol. She began losing sleep, each night half expecting the walls to come alive or for that creeping stain to shape into something monstrous. Seeking rational answers, Marisol decided to investigate the apartment's past renters. She discovered an old envelope stuffed behind a kitchen cabinet containing scattered photos and a short scribbled note. "I can't stay here. The shadows. They move at night. If you find this, leave." The photo showed a previous occupant, a young woman smiling in the living room. Another photo was just the living room corner, but with an unsettling blur hovering near the ceiling. Reading the note twisted Marisol's stomach. That occupant presumably left in a hurry, leaving behind cryptic warnings. She visited the building manager in his cramped office. He waved off her concerns about vanishings, claiming the tenants merely skipped out on rent. But he couldn't produce a single forwarding address. When pressed, he grew defensive, telling her if she disliked the building, she was free to break her lease. The conversation ended with him ignoring her questions about any official police statements. She left, more convinced than ever that Maplewood Heights was complicit in a cover-up or simply afraid of the truth. She scoured old newspaper archives at the local library. Indeed, no direct mention of missing residents from 404. Some short blurbs existed about individual no longer at Maplewood or unpaid rent, overshadowed by other local incidents. She recognized a pattern of disappearance every few years. It was never big news, just overshadowed or written off as transients moving away. The quiet, consistent vanishings spanned decades, like a slow, unstoppable drain of souls from that cursed space. The longer Marisol stayed, the worse the nightly phenomena became. She began hearing faint voices in the hallway, though the corridor would be empty on inspection. Doors softly creaked in the living room while she was in the bedroom. But upon rushing in, she'd find everything still. A cold spot formed near the living room corner each evening. No draft from windows or vents could explain it. One night, trying to quell her nerves, she turned on the TV only for it to flicker and show static. An electric surge possibly. But the hush enveloped the apartment again. She heard a faint scraping from behind the wall. Heart pounding. She pressed her ear to it, picking up what sounded like distant whispering. She couldn't decipher words, only the sense of multiple voices speaking at once. She jerked away, adrenaline spiking. Something beyond normal logic lurked there. Conrad revealed he heard odd noises from her side of the wall too, like scuttling or muffled conversation late at night. He offered vague sympathy but insisted he couldn't help. He admitted he dreaded crossing in front of 404's door after dark. The entire building's atmosphere seemed weighed down by the apartment's presence, as though 404 radiated dread. Marisol, feeling alone, realized it wasn't an isolated phenomenon. The entire fourth floor felt infected by the curse. Desperate for clarity, Marisol coaxed the building's custodian to let her peek into the basement storage area. Rumor said leftover belongings of vanished tenants sometimes ended up there. The custodian, weary and pale, relented one rainy afternoon. The basement reeked of mildew, dimly lit by a single swaying bulb. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes labeled by unit number. She found a dusty row 4404. Inside the boxes, random personal items from various eras, books, clothing, children's toys, antique trinkets, like a twisted museum of all who'd lived in 404. She flipped through old diaries, glimpsing repeated references to nightly voices. Walls that breathe. The hush at 2 a.m. A typed letter from the 1980s included a frantic paragraph. The apartment wants to erase me. My reflection vanishes in the mirror. One torn notebook page had a single phrase scrawled repeatedly, "Get out before it claims you." The sense of final desperation in their words chilled Marisol. Everyone had arrived, presumably attracted by cheap rent, and ended up succumbing to some dark force. In a battered cardboard box, she found a small Polaroid of what seemed to be a bedroom wall with black mold forming a humanoid silhouette. She recognized it resembled the creeping stain in her own bedroom. Stomach lurching, she realized she was repeating the cycle, unwittingly living the same story as all those prior tenants. Returning to her apartment that evening, she discovered the black stain on her bedroom ceiling had expanded drastically, forming a definite shape like a twisted mass of tentacles or swirling blackness. Her attempts to scrub it off proved futile. It seemed embedded, pulsating with intangible menace. When she turned off the bedroom lights, she swore she could see it faintly glowing. She fled, heart hammering, sleeping on the living room couch. At 2:06 a.m., she woke to the hush deeper than ever. Frozen in place, she saw the living room corner contort in her peripheral vision, like a shadow rising from the floor. She felt a heavy pressure on her chest, unable to move or scream, as if pinned by an invisible force. Then, as quickly as it came, it was released. She gasped for air, half expecting the shadow to remain. But the corner was empty. The hush lifted, normal night sounds returning outside. She realized it might have been a waking nightmare, or it might have been the entity that haunted 404 physically manifesting. At dawn, she nearly sprinted to the building manager, demanding an immediate solution or the chance to break her lease. The manager gave her a form, but with a bitter smirk said, No one breaks the lease for that unit. You can try, but you'll see. Something about his tone suggested a deeper complicity. Furious and terrified, she realized the building staff might be well aware of the curse, forcing occupant after occupant to unknowingly feed the apartment's hunger. Armed with the basement files, she read about a rumored ritual once attempted by a tenant in the 1960s, an exorcism of the space. The notes ended abruptly. No record of success or failure. Another occupant wrote about destroying the walls to break its hold. Also incomplete. Everything pointed to a cycle of attempts, all evidently unsuccessful. The suspicion grew that 404 was not haunted by a typical ghost, but by a phenomenon deeper, like a void devouring those who dwell within. Or perhaps an ancient malevolence latched onto that unit's foundation. She confided in an old friend, Malik, a believer in the paranormal who lived across town. He offered to help, though he was deeply uneasy. Together, they devised a plan to stage a cleansing ritual with researched incantations from local legends, hoping to banish whatever prowled behind the walls. If that failed, they'd physically break open the bedroom wall to see if something was hidden behind it. They set a date, next Friday night, at the stroke of midnight. All the while, the creeping black mold advanced. The hush at night intensified, starting earlier and ending later. Marisol's phone randomly malfunctioned inside the apartment. Power surges flickered her lights. She found new cracks forming in the living room ceiling, in shapes reminiscent of extended fingers. And at times, she caught fleeting glimpses of silhouettes reflected in her windows, silhouettes that vanished the moment she turned around. Friday midnight arrived. Malik and Marisol stood in the living room, the lights off, relying on flickering candles. They had scribbled a patchwork circle of salt around the perimeter, chanting fragments of an old exorcism text gleaned from local diaries. The air weighed heavily. The hush fell, deeper than ever, compressing their hearing until even their breath seemed distant. They poured salt at the threshold to the bedroom, set up a small handheld mirror with protective sigils. The bedroom door quivered. The black mold soared along the ceiling in swirling patterns. Malik held a half-burnt sage bundle, walking the perimeter, reciting lines in a trembling voice. The entire apartment creaked as if under immense strain. A moan emanated from the walls, or so it seemed. Then, the hush shattered with a roar. The overhead lights blinked violently, the corner shadows stretching forth like living shapes. Panicked, Marisol pushed the door open to the bedroom. The mold on the ceiling pulsated, forming a swirling black void. She hurled salt upward, chanting the final line of the incantation. The mass recoiled momentarily, but then an invisible force knocked them both off their feet. Candles toppled, plunging the room into near darkness. She glimpsed a shape in the corner, human-like yet featureless, reaching out an elongated arm. Malik yelled in terror. The shape turned to him, and the hush deepened again as if absorbing his scream. In one last burst of adrenaline, Marisol grabbed a crowbar from near the door. Swinging at the wall where the mold seemed thickest, plaster cracked. An unholy hiss echoed. She hammered again and again, chanting, until a chunk of the wall caved in. Behind it, an empty cavity with black slime. No sign of standard insulation or wire. It was as though the building's interior had rotted away. Then the hush ended in a massive thunderclap-like sound, and the shape vanished. Malik coughed, pulling her from the broken plaster. They realized the phenomenon had receded for now, the mold no longer swirling. They collapsed, physically and mentally spent. At dawn, Malik and Marisol stumbled to the manager's office, covered in dust, demanding immediate repairs or for the city to condemn 404. The manager stared, unimpressed, reminding them they were free to move if they didn't like it. Furious, Marisol ranted about the night's events. The black mold, the shape, but the manager smirked. "You're still here, so clearly you can handle it." She realized with horror how callous he was. Maybe even part of the building's twisted conspiracy to feed 404 new victims. Within days, a new occupant moved into a vacant unit on the same floor. Marisol tried warning them about the building's curse, but they laughed her off. Meanwhile, Malik's mental state deteriorated. He claimed to see the silhouette in every dark corner, hearing murmurs calling his name. Then 1 week later, Malik vanished. He left no note. Phone disconnected. The police found no leads. Suspecting he left town abruptly, Marisol recognized the pattern. The apartment's curse was extending beyond its walls, claiming outsiders who meddled. She felt anguish and guilt, suspecting her attempts at an exorcism unleashed the entity's wrath further. People around her started avoiding her, sensing the swirling negativity. The building's manager hardly concealed his grim satisfaction. Another one gone. Ms. Marisol? She realized the cycle would continue unless the entire place was destroyed or something final was done. But every method seemed futile. Knowing time was short, she decided on a radical measure. She would set fire to her own unit, hoping to burn out the evil latched to 404's structure. She had read that a similar attempt in the 1960s ended with the occupant vanishing and the damage quickly repaired. Yet she had no better plan. Summoning courage, she packed valuables, soaked the moldy bedroom wall with lighter fluid. As she flicked a match, the hush fell again. The flame danced, then snuffed out. She tried again, the hush swallowing the crackle. In frustration, she used a blowtorch from a neighbor's tool set. The hush roared, and a massive gust of cold wind burst out from the bedroom, extinguishing every flame. She realized the entity itself was defending the apartment from destruction. In the swirling gloom, the shape emerged again. More defined, a tall silhouette with elongated limbs, face blank, leaning from the bedroom door. She screamed, stumbling backward, only to find her front door locked by an unseen force. The hush and darkness pressed in. She felt the shape approach, overshadowing her. Her heart hammered, fear blotting out coherent thought. The shape extended an inky hand, and she swore she felt it brush her forehead. Cold as death, she blacked out. When she came to, the hush was gone. The shape vanished. Daylight streamed through the living room window. As if hours had passed, she found herself on the floor, bruised and trembling. The bedroom showed no trace of fire attempts. The mold receded, the walls intact, as if the apartment undid her sabotage overnight. She fled, grabbing a small bag of essentials, determined never to return. In a frantic haze, she drove out of Maplewood Heights, ignoring the manager's calls. She texted Conrad a goodbye, telling him to get out as well, offering no details. 4 days. She crashed with a friend across town, refusing to speak about her ordeal. But guilt gnawed. She realized she simply let the curse stand, leaving the next occupant to face the same fate. She felt powerless. Some evils, it seemed, refused to be banished. Weeks later, curious, she checked the Maplewood property listings. Apartment 404 was listed for rent again. Newly available. Low cost. Immediate occupancy. She felt a wave of helpless horror. She typed up her entire experience into a detailed account, hoping to warn any future tenant who might Google the address. but part of her doubted anyone would read or believe it. The hush. The shape. The vanishings. Who'd accept that as real? And so, in final resignation, she posted the blog under an alias, recounting the entire horror of 404. She concluded with a plea: if you see apartment 404 in Maplewood Heights, please, do not rent it. Everyone who stays disappears eventually. I escaped, but I fear the next occupant won't be so lucky. Yet, in the shadows of Maplewood Heights, the manager still offers the best deal in town on a spacious, newly available unit. The corridor on the 4th floor remains quiet. The hush that descends each night waits for the next naive tenant. And inside 404, the shape bides its time, as it always has, ready to claim the unsuspecting occupant, lost to the cursed vacancy of shadows.